Hi, everyone, and welcome to this month's conversation webinar. I'm Gabriela Cubeiro, CEO and co-founder of CASEpeer. We're a turnkey practice management software for personal injury law firms. And today, this is where I sit down and speak with founders and leaders from other companies in the legal industry. And our topics range from marketing to medical records. And with the new year around the corner, it's an important time, I think, for law firms to look ahead at how 2022 will be even better for them than 2021. And that's why I'm really excited today to welcome Maria Monroy, President and co-founder of LawRank, a leading SEO company for law firms. And we're ready to talk about how you can set your firm's marketing strategy up for success in 2022. Welcome, Maria.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. So nice to see you.
Yeah, well, let's dive right into it. So tell us a little bit about LawRank and maybe a little bit about your background.
Yeah, of course. So this February will be 8 years. We do web design, SEO, and some PPC. And I'm very lucky that I get to work with my husband, who's, and I'm being a little bit sarcastic if you didn't catch that, who's the other co-founder. But we're very, very passionate about what we do. We really help law firms grow and get on the first page of Google, which is tough, right? And there's a lot that can be said about that. But yeah, that's just a little bit of our background.
I love that. Helping businesses grow, right?
Yeah.
So we're diving right into it today. And I'll also say, everyone, you identify that chat area on the sidebar. Send in your questions. We'll tackle them during the webinar, after the webinar. So just want to make sure we keep an open dialogue with our attendees today. But let's get right into the meat of it, Maria. So what are the most important aspects, in your opinion, of a successful marketing strategy that every law firm should be doing?
That's a great question. So if you think about it, if you go to the gym, before you up the weight on anything, you really have to have your form correct or you're going to get hurt. And I think it's the same thing with law firms. It's really crucial that they have the fundamentals. And by fundamentals, I mean an awesome way to track where the leads are coming from and amazing intake. And there's a lot more, but I would say without those two crucial things, it doesn't matter how great your marketing is. You have to be able to say, okay, this is where the leads came from so that you can make better educated decisions. And you really have to have great intake because otherwise you're leaving cases on the table. And we see these two big mistakes over and over. Also, the number of missed calls, that it should really be under 10%. I've seen it as high as 33% with a firm that had like 600 calls a month. So really work on the fundamentals first, and then let's talk about marketing, or at least do it at the same time, because it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter how good your marketing is. If you don't know where the leads are coming from, if you can't handle the intake properly, you're bleeding out.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'll not to plug CASEpeer, but that's also where case management software comes in, right? Being able to track that client intake as it comes in. And as we all know, especially for personal injury law firms, the sales cycle is so short, making sure that you're on top of every lead that comes in. Because if you don't pick up the phone, I mean, that 30% is scary. They're going to pick up, call the attorney that's number two, and they might sign with them, right? It's such a short sales cycle.
Oh, absolutely. In PI, it's so competitive. And the thing is, you guys work on contingency. So the consumer, all they want to know is, do I have a case? And if they don't get that answer right away, they're going to move on to the next. It's a little bit different with criminal defense family law because they're going to have to pay. So they're going to research a little bit more. But in PI, it has to be quick, right? You have to be even more on top of it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So when we're talking about staying ahead and being on top of it, how can law firms stay one step ahead of their competitors' marketing strategies? Especially in PI, it's so competitive. People are always trying to one-up each other and chase that number one slot, or at least, first page. What does that look like in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, That's a really tough one. I'm going to be honest. That's tough, and that's really where, at least on the SEO side, we come in, because we're constantly doing research. We're looking at every single market. So if we see something change in one market, we're like, wait a minute, is this where everything's going? We're looking at other industries, right? And it really comes down to either your in-house team or your agencies. And this doesn't just apply to SEO, but it applies to anything. Like, one of the new marketing avenues that I've recently seen is, and not to plug in my friend because he is my friend, but I found this fascinating. He wraps trucks like they're a billboard. And then as the trucks drive through the city and you give them the zip codes, it picks up the data from the user and then retargets them on social media. And if they end up at the ER or at a body shop, it retargets them again. So there are new things all the time. I would say also being open to trying new things, right? I mean, the yellow pages, they don't work anymore, right? Don't pull a Blockbuster. So definitely stay on top.
Yeah. I love that. That's just a general good reminder going into 2022 is don't pull a Blockbuster. That truck thing sounds awesome. That is really sophisticated.
Weird. So he does it for like super big companies like Skechers, and I forget, but he does it for some PI firms. And I was like, wait, you do what? Like, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, I want to hear more about this. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. So being open to try new things too. And because chances are, if you're not, someone's going to be the first, right? I saw that there was news going around this week or last week that some personal injury law firm was the first PI firm in the Facebook metaverse. So, hey, someone had to be first, and, it's there will be more to come, but someone's got to, get ahead.
Yeah. The world moves fast now, so.
It sure does. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite questions that I like to ask people in your industry, because good marketing choices rely heavily on quality data. So what are 3 metrics law firms should be focusing on when they're evaluating their marketing strategies?
Right. So there are 3 metrics and I'm super passionate about these 3 metrics, because if every law firm just knew our 3 metrics, we call them non-negotiables. If you could just track those 3 metrics and compare them to your top ranked competitors that actually rank on the first page of Google, you would be able to determine, is my project on the right track? Or is there something really wrong here? Because I'll be the first one to admit that in our industry, the legal SEO industry, agencies don't have the best reputation. That's just the reality. And it's something that we're so aware of it. And if you track your referring domains, so where your backlinks are coming from, and you compare that number, we're talking about quantity. Quality is way harder to determine, but the number to your top ranked competitors, the number of pages indexed, how much content do you have on your website compared to your top ranked competitors, and then the monthly traffic. If you're not generating monthly traffic from informational intent searches, so everybody thinks car accident lawyer, personal injury lawyer, wrongful, no, forget about those terms. Those are commercial. Are you answering questions that users have? And if you're not, you're never going to rank. So if you look at those 3 metrics and you compare it, and that's the key point, you have to compare it. There has to be a starting point. You can tell, hey, is this on the right track or is it not? And the most important one, and this is just a KPI, is traffic. Look at your organic traffic, not paid. I don't care what you get from paid. Look at your organic traffic. How much traffic are you generating?
So a follow-up question to that, there's a lot of great free tools out there, but are there any in particular that you want to give a shout out for that and how firms can track this easily?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Those are great. I think SEMrush is a little bit easier to use, in my opinion. But those 2 tools, we use it.
Yeah.
They're just industry standards.
Yeah. And I know some of them you can get alerts on what your competition is doing or how they're ranking or if they're going up or down in keywords. So there's some really cool things you can do, especially if you get into some of the paid tiers.
Yeah. And then if you do this on Google and you put a URL, it'll tell you like the number of results. That's the number of pages indexed. Then do it for your competitors. And then you can see. Yeah.
That's a cool hack. I love that. I've never used that one. I'll have to test it out after this.
Yeah, we use it all the time.
Perfect. All right. I love learning new things in these. So let's talk about Google My Business. I know this is something you're really passionate about. And so tell me just basically, what is it and why is it so crucial for generating leads?
Yeah, if I had to pick a favorite, it would definitely be Google My Business. So let's kind of back up, right? When we're talking about organic SEO, there are two components. You have local and organic, and they're two completely different algorithms, and they're running at the same time. So you can actually do something that helps one, but really hurts the other. What we specialize in is making sure that we don't hurt either, so that you rank local and organic, because you're going to create repetition. But they work very differently, and it can be very, very difficult to really understand your local rankings, because organic is straightforward. You could be anywhere in Houston and you could type in personal injury lawyer. As you drive around the whole city, you're going to get the same results, no matter what, for organic. But the local pack changes because it's meant to be for local businesses. So we like to talk about pizza shops or a dry cleaner. So when you're at home and let's say you just moved to a new neighborhood and you need a dry cleaner, and you go to your phone, you Google dry cleaner, you don't want to drive 10 miles out. So Google's going to show you dry cleaners near you. And I know that Morgan and a couple of other law firms have really changed the way we perceive PI firms. We don't really think of them as a local business anymore. They can really go statewide and even multiple states or nationwide. But you are a local business. To Google, you're a local business. So most law firms, when they Google personal injury lawyer from their office, they show up in that map pack. And they're like, oh, great, I'm ranking the local pack. It's amazing. But the moment they walk across the street to Starbucks and they Google again, they're not there anymore, because it changes constantly, right? We measure it every 1,500 square feet. So I think the very first thing is to understand how to measure that. Now, the goal is a 1 mile radius from your office, so a total of 6.28 miles, and you want to rank top 3. That's within a mile radius. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually generates a lot of calls, because the local pack converts more than organic. It generates more calls because you have the reviews, it's someone near you. It just feels more trustworthy for some reason. And if you start to think about how you use Google, you'll realize, oh yeah, that makes sense. I look at the local pack, right? We call it local pack. So that's the first thing, is understanding how to measure it. We use a tool called Local Falcon. It's the best $20 a month that you're going to spend. And you can put a 1 mile radius, and you can put the search term, and it'll show you a map, and it'll show you dots all around the map. The dot in the middle is your office, and it'll show you where you rank on every single dot in the map for a 1 mile radius. So now you know, okay, wow, I rank out of my office, but what good does that do me? Because if somebody's searching for a PI from while they're in my office, something went wrong. So really, I want to rank around my office, right? So that's the very first thing. Now, because it's connected to your Google My Business and to your reviews, that's where it just becomes like, to a user, they're like, oh, I can read the reviews. It converts very, very well. And again, you want to create that repetition. So one of the things I always get asked is, well, should I have multiple offices throughout my metro so that I can be in different local packs? The answer is yes, absolutely. Right.
And are there any ways that that law firms should go about this? I know historically there were things like Regis and some of these companies that Google kind of caught on. Is that working now with Google Business or not? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I wish it was, and maybe one day, but right now, even if you have a real office in a Regis, Google's like, you're not going to rank. It's not going to happen. So to answer, the requirements per Google My Business rules is that it's a unique location. And I like to give, by unique location, I mean you have 4 walls, you have like a suite number assigned to you. You don't share it with anybody else. And I know it's common for law firms to share offices with one another, but because Google fears that you're just like your friends hooking you up and they're letting you send a postcard so that you can get into the local path, Google's like, no, you're sharing offices. My echo's terrible. Mine? Is it
It
better now?
sounds okay for me, but yeah, maybe bring the mic closer. Say it again.
Mark, is that better?
That seems better to me too.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll hear
So a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. I lost my train of thought.
So we were saying about the sharing of the law firm's offices.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like, let's say a friend says, oh yeah, use my address. Is Google kind of onto that as well?
Yeah, and they don't want to have to be the ones to determine if it's a legitimate office or not. So to them, if it doesn't look legitimate, then they're like, no, like, you're just not going to rank. And I like to give absurd examples. So think of it this way. McDonald's and Burger King would not share a location, an address. Target and Walmart would not share an address. So always just go to the extreme and then think, okay, how does Google determine this? And people get really frustrated with Google. We get really frustrated with them. It's difficult. But at the end of the day, they have to put things in place so that we don't end up with, this is what happened. Firms had a bunch of registers. They were ranking. Somebody would actually show up wanting to speak to an attorney. Then they would go and they'd leave a negative review. And Google felt like, well, this is creating a poor user experience because now we have people showing up. They found you on Google, so they're imputing this to us. They don't want that. They care about the user experience.
That's an interesting way to think about it because I feel like there's always sort of an us versus them approach, right? With marketers and law firms, there's sort of this anger and resentment of Google. But when you phrase it like that as someone that's, on the technology side, I'm like, of course, they're putting their customer, their user first. And that makes a lot of sense. So would you recommend that firms lease out a very small office space? And I mean, is that really the best way to do it?
So what we tell all of our newer clients is, let me show you the return on investment from your Google My Business first. Then we can explore strategically where you can get a secondary location. We have a client that's about to get his fourth, started with one with us in a very, very large metro. So, I mean, he could really have 10. So that's what we like to tell our clients. And that's where the tracking comes in, because I don't just want to know what came from Google. I want to know what came from Google Organic, what came from the GMB. If you have multiple GMBs, what came from which GMB, right?
And are there Google tools and things like that allow you to track those sorts of leads? Do you recommend you guys use CallRail? There's probably a couple different ways that people can track this, right?
Yeah, we use CallRail. That's how we track. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you joining that may not be familiar, obviously you can go to callrail.com, but it's like a phone number. You would have a different phone number essentially associated with these different listings, and then it helps you track volume. I'm probably oversimplifying and you can describe it better, but something like that, right?
Yeah. So each Google My Business would have its own tracking number. We still have to put your actual number to not cause a NAP issue, name, address, phone number inconsistencies. And on your website, you still have your phone number at the on the top, but then there's an image on top of it that generates. So if you look on the left-hand corner and you refresh, you'll see that the number changes because it's a pool of data, so that you can have multiple users on the website and we know where they each came from to avoid any confusion.
Oh, very interesting. I love that. So the pandemic had some effects on Google My Business, right? What were those?
Well, initially they stopped letting people review, so that was interesting.
Why
Now
was that, or do you know?
I think they were getting so many negative reviews for businesses being closed that they had to stop. It's back up now, but that was initially a problem. I don't think it's changed it significantly in any way. I hope that it allows for more of a virtual location. That would be awesome for us because I think we are moving in the direction, like we're fully virtual. And now we're going to remain fully virtual. So even the employees that we had in San Diego moved, and we're like, yeah, that's fine. We're completely 100% virtual. So we hope that at some point, maybe it allows for something that isn't so strict. Like right now, technically, if you have an office, it should be staffed. So even if you get like a tiny office during business hours, if somebody shows up, it's supposed to be staffed. And what happens is competitors will report each other and will say, this is not a real location, because it's taking business from them, right? So that's where you get into a trickier area where it is technically supposed to be staffed.
Well, it's an interesting time, and I think it's an important thing for us to be talking about Google Business today, because we are definitely at a crossroads where a lot of law firms, especially, I mean, some larger ones, but certainly some of the smaller ones, are deciding if they need to renew a lease, if they even need an office, because they have people working remotely, and obviously office space is expensive. But I would say that, a counter to that, and Maria, I'd like to get your thoughts, but obviously think about what you're spending on paid search, or how much you're spending in other areas to market your firm. That office, if Google My Business is working, and everyone says it is, it's worth the investment, right? And is that kind of how you would approach it when you're talking with firms?
Absolutely. 1,000%. Now, again, the tracking and the intake have to be there, but this is why most of our clients are getting secondary, third. I mean, like I said, we have a client that's getting a fourth location, started with one, because it's generating so many cases.
So for firms that maybe already have a Google My Business page, do you have any tips for them on how they can optimize it?
Yeah. So the best thing you can do is look at the competitors that are doing well and go and see what it is that they're doing. That's just a tip for anything SEO. We're tracking everybody all the time. Sometimes I meet someone at a conference and I know that like the SEO team was like doing a presentation on their project once, and I'm like, why do I feel like I know you? But I add the categories. So if you're a personal injury lawyer, you want to add the type of cases that you handle. You want to have pictures. A virtual tour is amazing. The 360 tour of your office. Obviously reviews, that's huge. I can't stress it enough. And I think we'll talk about this at some point, but that's a big one. Now you're going to see that a lot of firms are adding the keyword into the name. So the Google My Business listing has, again, a different algorithm, and the algorithm is broken up into three parts: proximity, relevance, and prominence. As an agency, we can impact relevance and prominence. We can't impact proximity, right? That's why you would have to get multiple offices, but changing the name impacts the relevance. So if somebody's looking for a personal injury lawyer and your law firm is Smith Personal Injury Firm, you have the keyword in the name. It helps. We are noticing that it's helping less, but it's still helping. And at some point, it might even become a non-negotiable to have that in the name if you want to rank. Or it might just go away completely, and Google will say, nope, we see what you guys are doing. We're going to filter it out. But if you're going to do that, you have to do it right. You have to get a DBA. You have to update your signage. You have to have some business cards on hand with the right name. Obviously, check with your state bar. Every bar is different about this. I know Texas just changed it so that you can do business with a different name. There are ways to do it right. There are ways to do it incorrectly. And you do have to update it everywhere on the internet, which is a big undertaking if you don't have
It's a big commitment. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, that's like, when I started in legal, phone books were still a thing. And, always the ones that started out with like AAA injury attorneys, like just so they'd be number one, in the phone book. So it seems like every year there's some form of a hack. And it's interesting because a lot of firms are kind of moving away from that, it feels, but it makes sense that on some level it still helps with rankings. Do you think that the injury lawyers, for example, would that also help with organic rankings at all, having that in your name? It doesn't anymore. Interesting.
It doesn't do anything, and the URL name doesn't do anything anymore. So it's changing, though. You never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So we had a question come in. How can I set up multiple GMBs? We kind of touched on that a little bit. So if anyone has a follow-up to that, go ahead and ask again. And then Christian asked about video production for lawyers as part of COVID-19. Any thoughts on video content? Is that something that's important these days?
so it depends. Having a brand video definitely helps. I think that's where you can really try to get to the potential client, like why they should hire you, have like your passion come through, the reasons why they should be hiring you. I think everybody almost expects a video on sites now.
Mhm.
The other thing is if you're doing social media, if you're on TikTok, Instagram, and you're putting content out there, that's another way of generating cases. Now, that's not what we do, but I am
Mhm.
seeing it done. You can see CEO lawyer Ali Awad. I'm actually
Mhm.
speaking at his conference next week. You know, he's the biggest PI lawyer online, and he's all virtual too. He runs a virtual law firm, which I want to hear more about this. I think they're going to talk about this during the conference, how they do that. So that's another way of generating. It just depends what you mean by videos. Sometimes we
Mhm.
get asked, does it help to have a video on our car accident page or wrongful death? And it might help a little bit, but it doesn't help SEO. It might help convert. And that's really what you want the videos for. You want them for conversion, but they don't help rank.
Interesting. Okay, that's great advice actually, because a lot of people I think might feel that they need that to get to number one or something like that. Interesting. One question that came in: did Google change the name of Google My Business to Google Business Profile? Are those two different things? Any is that a question that you are able to answer, Maria?
So I saw that the other day, and I haven't had a chance to talk to the SEO team about this. I'm sure they know. I don't know the
Mhm.
answer, but David, if you shoot me an email, I will get you the answer.
And David, at the end of this, we'll show Maria's email address, or you can always reach out to CASEpeer. We'll get that email to you so that you can reach out to Maria after this, and we'll get you more details. And another question, let's see, we're actually getting into reviews now, so it's perfect. Someone asked, how many reviews would you suggest as a healthy number? And so maybe we dive into that and then dive into the next question. Why are reviews so important, and where should firm owners be driving clients to review them?
Yeah. So again, we're going to go back to the user experience, and Google cares
Mhm.
about that from top to bottom because they don't want a negative experience imputed to them. Now, they're also important because that does impact rankings. So, reviews do impact your local rankings, absolutely. And what Google loves is a brand because brands are the solution to spam. Google has said this before. If you have a brand, you have something to protect. So,
Mhm.
and what do brands have? They have reviews, right? Now, we only care about Google My Business. We don't care about any other platform. Some lawyers are like, well, what about Avo or Avo? I don't even know how to pronounce it. What about Yelp and Facebook? We really don't, it doesn't really impact anything. What we really care about is Google My Business.
Mhm.
So, and I oftentimes hear, well, you need a Gmail, but everybody has that problem. Every single law firm has the clients that don't have a Gmail. And those clients, sure, send them somewhere else. But I would much rather have 100 Google My Business reviews and zero everywhere else than 1,000 everywhere else and zero on Google My Business
Mm.
any day.
That's really great advice. And is there, in your mind, sort of a threshold of like a minimum that new firms or firms that are starting out with reviews should really push for? Obviously, we all want 1,000 reviews, but is there a golden number?
There's no golden number, and I'm going to say what I say about almost everything when it comes to digital marketing. Look at your competitors. How many
Hmm.
reviews do they have? That's what you're trying to catch up to, right? And I know it can be tough, especially as a new firm. So, if that's the case that you're a brand new firm, I would say focus on the quality of those reviews. Then getting the key terms in there and or the city helps as well. You don't want to be
Mm.
too egregious and have every single review be like I was in a car accident and I was looking for a lawyer in Clearwater. I know I have a client watching right now from Clearwater, so I did want to shout out to her. Hi, Carolyn. You don't want to do that, right? But a couple here and there where it mentions that they were in a car accident or they were looking for a personal injury in Houston, that helps too.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for people on like best practices for getting reviews? Like, is it reaching out to satisfied clients? Is it having it in every email you send out in your footer? Like, are there things that you recommend to your clients?
Yeah, so we use Bird Eye internally. Some of our clients, before signing on with us, they already had Podium or Connect or some other tool to help generate reviews. Those absolutely help. We don't recommend asking for reviews if you believe the client doesn't feel you did a good job. And now we understand that sometimes maybe you did a great job, but they don't get that. I just wouldn't ask for a review at that point. The other piece of advice that is crucial is don't be afraid of a negative review. If you have 300 5-star reviews and no negative reviews, everyone's going to think that they're fake. What is it that we do as humans? We go to the negative and we read them and we want to see how you responded. I want to see how that business treated the upset customer. You're not responding to the upset customer or to the negative fake review. You're responding to the third party reading. So be very professional in your response. Keep it very friendly. Don't worry about getting a negative review. Worry about getting 300 negative reviews, but don't shy away from one negative review.
And do you recommend that firms respond to every review, positive and negative? Is that okay? Perfect.
And you can have
go ahead.
You can have like 8 different positive responses that you alternate. And then every few months, say every 3 months, you change them up a bit and then you rotate them again. And you can have someone in your staff doing them. We also recommend that you incentivize your staff. Hey, for every positive review, you're going to get a bonus or a spiff, just incentivize them. It's wherever you put attention. So remember that firm I told you had 33% missed calls? They had all sorts of reasons why they were justifying the missed calls. The construction in the office, I really could go on for hours. So I started calling them every morning. And this was completely outside of what we do, but I was just so annoyed. I started calling them every morning and being like, all right, guys, well, you've had 33%. I'm looking at this all day. I'm going to call you at the end of the day and we're going to see where you're at for the day. Problem fixed in a week. Never again. Because they knew I was looking, they knew I was calling. Put attention on it.
Yeah, accountability. And I love the idea of incentivizing team members. And I also see this happening on social media where then they'll give shout outs to specific team members if they get mentioned in a review, which can be really nice. And all of a sudden now you have your staff members or other attorneys identifying happy customers, which makes sense because they're the ones that are speaking to them more often than business owners. So it can also help them say, hey, it really helps me when you write a review. It's been such a pleasure working with you. And they're far more likely to respond to that than, an email. Not to say you shouldn't do that too, but that warm touch asking for the review probably goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the problems, and I feel for law firms because I'm a business owner and I get it. Most lawyers didn't go to law school to run a business. They want to practice law. And you guys have to balance that. I have to run this business and I have to practice law. And sometimes clients are like, I don't want to listen to my intake. And I'm like, well, I get it. I don't want to listen to my intake, right? Like I get it. Yeah. It's so tough. And I feel for you guys because I know you're in a tough spot where you're trying to balance 2 very difficult things, right? So and a lot of it comes down to your staff, right? One thing I always tell everybody is you can't teach friendliness. So when hiring an intake team, if they're not friendly, you can't teach that. You can train them. Go ahead.
That's great advice. I love that. I mean, and it's such a fundamental thing, right? Your intake person should be friendly. They should be able to talk to anyone. And if they're not making you feel at ease in an interview, it's probably not the right person for the job.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, the growing a business and balancing that with law. And I think that, that's also where companies like LawRank really come in, right? Because you can either build an in-house marketing team and hire a bunch of experts, or you can outsource that component to someone who's an expert. But, again, there are certain tips that I hope you all take away from this conversation we're having with Maria today, but don't necessarily close yourself off from the idea of also using an agency to help you really transform your firm as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next question for you, Maria. In terms of web design, what are things that firms should be thinking about? I've seen a lot of great law firm websites over the years, some modern law firm websites that feel like they're missing certain pieces of information. I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of current trends and what every website needs to have.
The most important thing is that your website is conversion driven, because it doesn't matter how many people go to it. If they're not converting, they're not contacting you, that's a problem. So you don't want it to be too busy. You want to make sure you have a headline, byline. In 5 seconds, if we have a stranger go to your website and then we close it out in 5 seconds, they should be able to tell us what you do, where you do it, and why they should hire you. 5 seconds. There should be call to action, a phone number that's on the top right-hand corner that stands out. Again, very clean, very professional, but to the point, especially in PI. In PI, you need a contact submission form up higher. When it's criminal, family law, when it's non-contingency, then you don't need that. But with PI, it's really, they have to call you. Get them to call you. That's what matters.
And do you have recommendations on mobile friendly? I mean, obviously these days that's a must,
Yeah.
but are there any particular things that you look for in a mobile site for firms?
Obviously the call, the click to call, or
Yeah.
the little phone where you can call. But yeah, nowadays it used to be, back when we first started, that was like a selling point, right? Like, we're mobile responsive. And it used to be, there was a mobile site and then a desktop version, and then it became mobile responsive. Now, it's rare that people even ask. It's kind of like, it's assumed that now they're going to be, but it does have to look a certain way on mobile as well, right? You can't overwhelm them. And the picture has to look right. So, and then page speed is another one. It has to load fast, not just for SEO purposes. We're the most impatient people ever now. Thanks to Netflix and YouTube and TikTok, we're just impatient. We want everything now. I want it right now. And Amazon Prime, I mean, God forbid I can't get Amazon Prime in 2 hours, right? Prime Now, I'm annoyed, right? Like when COVID hit, you couldn't get it in 2 hours. It was like the next day. I was so annoyed, and I was like, "What's wrong with you?"
I know it's definitely come a long way from just in the last 5 years. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
One thing too with web design, sometimes you land on websites, they still don't even have like a photo. Thoughts on that? I mean, people want to see humans, I think. I'm curious what you as the expert would say.
Oh, absolutely. So when you go to a website, before you scroll, we call that the hero image. It has to lead with you. There are some exceptions. So I will say that if you're 24 years old, probably let's not lead with you, because that's going to impact age, impacts conversion. If you're a lawyer or a doctor, age actually works in your favor. I've had clients that are like, "Oh, but I look so old." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? This is like you're the best." Like, seriously, like a lawyer, that's like the best thing ever, being old. But you want to lead with yourself. We have a client, big advertisers, didn't lead with themselves, but did all these commercials. I was like, "How are you not leading with you guys? Like, to scroll to like see you." Right? Definitely, you're totally right. You have to lead with the lawyers.
So let's retire the gavels and the books and things like that, and lead with you, and authenticity, I think, is a part of that, right? That's the point. People want to know who they're buying or what they're buying when they're reaching out to you.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where video comes in. That's really where that's going to impact it. And I'm hearing this topic a lot, especially with social media, right? Are you authentic, right? Because it comes across if you're not. And I think that that's going to become more and more of a thing, especially as we move so much of everything to, the digital space. Like this whole NFT thing, I don't even get me started. I'm still trying to like wrap my head around it. Like what people are buying art online, like I don't like digital art. I just don't even get it. So
we're all going to be in the metaverse in no time and never leaving our houses, right? Like, so I'm a little scared, but I mean, who knows where we'll be in 5 years.
Oh God.
I love it. I know the art online stuff. I'm right there with you, Maria. I'm still trying to figure it out. We'll have an expert on here sometime to walk us through it. So talk to me about SEO. Obviously, you've alluded to it a lot throughout your talk today, but in your opinion, how does SEO play a role in overall marketing strategy? And I guess, can you start actually by defining what you consider SEO?
So we would consider SEO, let's say you're a PI firm, ranking on the first page of Google or in the local pack, that's SEO. So you're optimizing a website. You're telling Google, hey, Google, I'm a PI firm in San Diego. And the goal is to rank on the first page. Now, I don't think SEO is for everybody. I really don't. I've spoken to some firms that they don't want the informational intent content. They don't want to get a bunch of calls, especially lawyers that are very they like a very specific type of case. They only want to handle med mal or, bad faith insurance. Might not be the best fit if you're just looking for these big cases and you don't want to take what we call the low-hanging fruit cases. Because with SEO, those low-hanging fruit cases keep the lights on and you're waiting to get those big cases, right? So it's not for everyone. Where SEO is like no other, it's that, and I guess you could argue Google Ads as well, but from an organic sense, it's direct intent. People are actually looking for you. When you're running radio or commercials, and not that I don't recommend that, we can talk about that. I actually do. When you're building a brand, you're hoping to either catch someone when they're in an accident or that they'll remember you when they are. But when it comes to SEO, you're actually capturing people when they're looking for you. So it's really powerful. They're actually looking for you. And it can be a strategy by itself. We have clients we even have solo practitioners that the only marketing they do is SEO. We have clients that combine it with PPC. We have clients that combine it with commercials, billboards, everything. So it doesn't have to be a standalone thing. It doesn't have to be part of something else. And it absolutely works if you rank. Because the running joke is, where's the best place to hide a dead body? Second page of Google. Nobody goes there, right?
I love it.
So many firms are like, I've been doing SEO for 8 years. I mean, I've had firms that have said, you're my last shot. I'm like, geez, no pressure. But they're literally like, I've tried this forever and it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, it's not that it doesn't work. So you haven't found someone that gets you to the first stage. And the thing is that there are a couple things. It's not as straightforward as ranking on the first page. There are really 3 ways to generate a return from SEO: organic, local, informational intent. If I've been in a car crash, do I need to hire a lawyer? It's informational, but then they call you, right? And statistically speaking, if we just do the math, you're not going to rank. There are 5 spots on the first page, 3 in the local pack. And you really want to rank not just for one term. You want to rank for everything. You want to dominate your market. You want to rank top 3 local, organic for everything that is considered PI. Truck, car, Uber, slip and fall, wrongful death, everything. That's really where you really see a significant difference. That's when you've got to start hiring more lawyers. You grow your intake department. That's when it changes. So I think it's crucial. And I'm not saying that we're the only ones that can do this, but no, that there are a few very good agencies, but it's important that you hire the right agency and an agency that has the intent that they want to get you to the page.
So I have a follow-up question to that because I'm sure we have people here joining us today that have been burned by a so-called SEO expert, right? The joke I like to say is if anyone says they're an SEO expert, like run the other way. So, and I'm saying that I know actually I would call you an SEO expert, and
No, I'm not.
in the best sense. So what are your thoughts on that? And what are some questions people can do to vet a great agency?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because my husband, I always tell him he's an SEO expert. I'm like, you're one of the top SEO experts in the legal industry. And he's like, Maria, I don't consider myself an expert. And I'm just like, what? How? And he's like, because SEO is always changing and you're always learning. And he's so passionate about it. I'm like annoyed. I'm like, oh my God, you're totally an expert. And he's like, no, I'm really not. Like, you can't really be an SEO expert yet. So he would totally, have you guys met?
I don't think I've ever met him, actually. We'll have to make that happen.
Yeah, you guys would totally hit it off because he would be like, yes, you get me. Not on the subject. But I think a couple of things. You guys are really looking for three things. Agency that has the knowledge, an agency that has the intent, and I'll get to the third in a second. So you could have an agency that has the knowledge. FindLaw, I mean, I think 99% of lawyers hate FindLaw, so I can say this. FindLaw, they have the knowledge. They rank themselves. It's an inherent conflict of interest if FindLaw is doing your SEO because they rank themselves. But do they have the intent of ranking you? Probably not. And somebody could have the intent, but they don't have the knowledge. So they're trying, they care, they want to rank you, but they don't know how.
And I want to unpack this for 1 second. And again, FindLaw is a fine directory to be in. But what Maria means by that is that they're actually bidding on your search terms so that they can control where that market share goes. So you don't want to give somebody money to handle your SEO when they are also then taking that money and competing with you in your market to rank on the first page of Google or to show up in their PPC, right? So you definitely want to be intentional. I'd say the same for Avo, not that they have those services, right? But if you're looking for to invest your marketing dollars somewhere, again, it's one thing to show up in a directory or at the top of a list or for like a premier listing. But if you want to have someone manage your SEO, make sure they're not taking that money and working against you.
Yeah. And that's the thing with FindLaw. They've done a great job and they have, I mean, you ask any question, any legal question, and FindLaw comes up. They know how to do it, but for the most part, there's a few exceptions. They don't really do it for their clients, right? So having that knowledge combined with the intent, because it's also very common in our industry where you'll talk to an agency and they'll show you these two firms that are ranking amazing. Where are their other 500 clients ranking, right? They have the knowledge, but will they have the intent with you? And I think that's what's crucial. And you really want to look at multiple projects and recent projects. So, and then the third thing is going to be budget. And this is really, I can't stress this enough, without the budget for the content production. So all of our content producers are attorneys or JDs, our editors are attorneys as well. And the content for backlinks, it's just not possible. We have the knowledge and the intent. Without the budget, we can't do it. So if you think that, and this is for PI only, but say you think that for $5,000, you're going to make all these millions of dollars inside these big, huge cases, that intuitively should be like, wait a minute, is this really going to happen? And sometimes I talk to a firm, especially newer firms, and they're like, well, Maria, what would you do then? Like, I don't have the budget. I would give it to you if I had it. I don't have it. And I'm like, just wait. Just hold off. You don't have to do SEO all the time. Do it when you're going to do it right. But it doesn't, I almost feel like, and I tell my husband this all the time, I'm like, I feel like law firms feel like they have to do something. Like, hey, I have to do something. Like, this might not work, but I'm going to give these people a couple grand. And then they feel like, oh, I'm doing something. Right.
And then you feel robbed because you don't see the results. And the reality is that these things require a certain degree of investment. Yeah. And I think that actually today we've talked about some things that they could be doing, right? Driving reviews to your Google profile, making sure that your Google My Business, your Google profile is up to date with photos, descriptions, all your practice areas, your specialties. There's a lot of things that you can do to help your business. If you need a website update, that's something you can spend a little money on. But an intentional content marketing strategy that's really going to drive you on the first page, that takes time and it takes money, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's actually where FindLaw comes in, or any directory. You just have to be careful with what term you're signing up for. So like a perfect example is like a client was like, hey, FindLaw wants me to sign up for this top spot. Can you review it? So I go on and I review it, and it was like personal injury lawyer, San Diego County. Nobody's searching for county. Do you search for a dentist, San Diego dentist? Dentist, San Diego County? No. So also use your intuition of would I, and I guess sometimes it's tough because you're highly, and I'm talking to lawyers, you're highly sophisticated. So it's hard to put yourself in like the average person. How would the average person search for you?
I even think about that with like ads, right? I mean, now it's impossible actually to avoid Google ads, but I always used to be like, I'm never someone that would click on a Google ad. And I'm sure you hear law firms say that all the time. And the reality is that just because you don't do it doesn't mean that 80% of the people landing on those search results won't. I'm sure you saw that question that just came in. Does signing up for two different terms hurt? For example, like personal injury attorney versus automobile accident attorney. Do you have advice for people targeting multiple terms, or should they focus on one term to start? Any thoughts on that?
Caleb, do you mean, are we talking about FindLaw? And now my other thing is, people don't really search automobile. So again, you're highly sophisticated. People search car. Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's a great question. David, lawyers.com. But no, the answer is no, Caleb. You can sign up for multiple. Just make sure that, and if you want, Caleb, just send me the actual key term in the city. I can tell you how many people are searching for that. And then you can determine, hey, is this worth it? Because if 10 people are searching for it, and then now I have to hope that 10 people click on the directory, and out of those 10 people, they contact me. So I can help you with it. Just email me. And then David, with respect to the directories, how would you rank them from the top down? So directories include AVO lawyers, super lawyers, or CFI law. So this is a little bit more complicated. You have to Google. So I would Google personal injury lawyer, car accident lawyer, and find the directory that's the top directory. That's what you want to be on. And if
that's
you have
great
budget,
advice.
If you have the budget, go to multiple. But you always want to see how they're doing, because a great example, AVO used to be great. We don't recommend it anymore. It doesn't rank very well. Unless something's changed in the last few months. I haven't touched on this lately, but we don't recommend it anymore. So
I remember back in the day, all the attorneys had to be on there answering questions and, all that fun stuff. That said, it still can't hurt to update your profile and claim it and all that probably. But should you be spending money on it? That's an interesting point. I love that suggestion to just search, especially if you're, looking again, targeting your local area. Having that insight's great advice. We've got another question about Nolo. Any thoughts on that one, Maria?
I haven't heard that it's good or bad, but that's probably a bad thing. If it ranks, you could give it a shot. And this is again where tracking goes into place, right? Because if you don't have tracking and you sign up for FindLaw and then you're like, oh, I'm not getting any cases from them, and then you stop it, somebody else takes the spot, and then you're like, my cases are down. Well, would you track it? So again, it's always going to go back to tracking. And that's why not to plug you. And the funny thing is, I really was like, this is going to look like a plug, but it was like really like the true answer. And I told you before, you guys make my life so much easier, because when clients are using you guys and I'm getting these reports, I'm like, oh, thank God. And I can say, look, this is what came from here, from that. This is what we need to change,
Mhm.
cancel fine law, stop doing social media, whatever, right? And
Yeah.
we can help our clients more.
Well, and that's the thing too. One of the things we said early on is try new things, but you can't try new things if you're not ready to test if they're working, right?
You got to have the form down. I mean, I love the gym, and it's like I can't live without it. But for me, it's like if I don't have the form, I'm worried I'm going to get hurt, right? And when I first
Yeah.
started, that was the most intimidating part of it. It was like I don't know how to have proper form, so I worked with a trainer. You
Mhm.
guys have to have the fundamentals, and that's going to make your marketing work so much better. And if you're curious, always look at who does it well. So
Mhm.
call Morgan and Morgan, test their intake team. Wilshire Law Firm, they have a good in LA. For those of you in
Mhm.
California, they have a good intake. I've called a lot of
Yeah.
firms to see how they do it. Everything has already been, and I've learned this as a business owner. Sometimes as business owners, we think like, I got this, like I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to do it that way. But and the right word is, I don't know if the right word is ignorant, but that's like very egotist, like, oh yeah, I can figure this out. No, there's so much data. There's so many books. There's so many podcasts, so many webinars. Like there's so much data. You're not alone. You can
Yeah.
find the resource and, learn from others. Right.
I love that, Maria. I had a guest on another webinar last week who his advice to attorneys was actually, if you want to run your firm like a business, you have to check your ego at the door because you don't have all the answers. And that's a good thing because we all learn from people, make others people mistakes. That way you don't have to start from square one, right? And I love the idea of calling other firms. I will say I've called I've called some of my clients and you end up on their voicemail, right? And that's like the worst thing that could happen. So making sure that that's not the case at your firm, especially if you're spending any kind of money advertising. You can't risk a client or a prospect going to voicemail.
Could be a huge case.
So
And you
yeah.
never know. And that's one of the
And
things.
Murphy's Law, right? The huge case is the one you'll miss, right?
And you know how we're saying like, okay, this whole NFT thing, but this is like the beauty of technology and the internet. We've never had more access to information. Oh, and the word I was looking for was arrogant. I felt so arrogant.
Mm.
There have been times where I was like, that I've been doing something one way for a year. How arrogant. Like there's so much data, there's so many books. Some of my best friends at this point, some of the people I talk to the most are literally my direct competitors, other agency
Mm.
owners, because we exchange information. There's just,
Mm.
and that's why I love the whole idea of Justice HQ. I know Bob will appreciate this,
Yeah.
right? Is amazing because there's so much synergy.
It's people helping each other out, right? There's so much that comes from strength in numbers and learning from your peers or learning from, again, people that are on the same path, a little bit ahead or a little bit behind, and potentially making the same mistakes you have. So one last question, and then I'll ask for a last piece of advice for you, Maria. But Ryan asked, aside from directory profiles, is there another great approach that firms can take to building links? Should people be outreaching to other firms or other companies maybe for backlinks? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's super complicated because the way that oh God, I hope the SEO team is not watching me. The way that like what the words say when you click it, so it could have like your brand, so it could be exact match anchor, so it's the anchor, that's the anchor text. So say you're you're trying to rank for personal injury lawyer, it could say personal injury lawyer, you click it, it goes to you, or car accident lawyer, you click it, or it could be a brand, or it could be something else, right? The percentage of the anchor text matters, so it's way more complicated. To be honest, at this point in time, it really does require a very high level of expertise, especially in PI. There isn't one way. I would look at your competitors, put them through SEMrush or RFs, and look at what the ones ranking. Please, competitors ranking. I want to address something real quick. Sometimes people have an idea of who their top ranked competitors are, but in reality, they're not. Always verify, because it could be a firm that does a lot of offline advertising or a great trial lawyer, but they might not rank. So you want to look at who's
Just
ranking.
because they're on the radio doesn't mean that their website's doing everything it should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. But you want to do a combination, and you want to make sure that they're relevant to what you do. So you could, like, Chamber of Commerce is a great link. You want to join organizations, you want to get memberships. Definitely media mentions are great. Guest blog posts. You have to be really careful because the quality matters a lot. And it used to be about knowing which links to build. Now it's a combination of knowing which links to build, but knowing what not to build. Because one link can really hurt you. And one of the sayings with our SEO team is don't ever get attached to a link, because sometimes we'll pay a lot for a link, like thousands of dollars, and we notice that it hurts, but the SEO specialist doesn't want to remove it because they're attached to it. And the rule is, like, never get attached to a link. Like, we test and track everything. And it's like, if it didn't work, remove it. Who cares? We lost the money. It doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. Don't get, like, or it took a really long time to be able to generate the link, and they just get attached. And it's like, they're not allowed to get attached.
That's really sage advice. And I mean, a lot of that ties into SEO. And that's where having potentially reaching out to you and talking to an expert about it is probably really helpful. So any last advice? We're coming up to the end. I will say someone said they just joined and missed the beginning. Jennifer, there will be a recording emailed to you so you can rewatch. The answer is not necessarily, but Maria definitely talked about that today. So any last bit of advice for 2022 for law firms before we wrap?
The biggest advice that I would have, again, is going to be really work on your fundamentals. Go back and listen to your intake. Make sure that you're tracking things properly. And my biggest advice, if you're going to switch companies in 2022, also trust your gut. You have to trust your gut, but really also take the time to become a more educated consumer and take the time to interview people, verify their results. I'm always happy to help. So even if you're like, hey, Maria, you're not the right fit or completely out of budget, what do you think about this? Right? I am happy to help or look at it. And I did want to take a moment to thank Carolyn, because she did give me a shout out here. So I do appreciate it. She's an amazing client. She jumps on every single webinar. Anything that I do, she's there to support me. So I really do appreciate it, because I know you're busy. So thank you.
I love that. And one thing I will just call out, that she's called you guys true partners. That means a lot.
I'm gonna cry.
That's a really, we all as business owners, from law firms to case management softwares to marketers, we all dream of our customers, our clients saying something like that about us. So welcome, Caroline. Really happy to have you here today.
All right. Well, my fourth baby. So we have 3 kids, and we always joke that LawRank is the 4th kid. So
yeah. Oh, I hear that. CASEpeer is my firstborn too. I haven't broken that to my 4-year-old yet, but I think she knows. I think she knows without me saying it in so many words. So, well, everyone, Maria, thank you so much for joining us today. This was, I think, just a really valuable conversation. So for everyone, I've brought on the screen Maria's email. So she's kindly said, hey, if you have any questions or feedback or didn't get to something in the webinar, please reach out to her, and you can find them on social media. And I'll say, if you're not following Maria on Instagram, Maria LawRank, she puts out great content, great videos with tips and things like that. So go check her out. No, don't follow me. Well, go check out LawRank for sure.
I'm kidding. And I get a little embarrassed because I'm on there a lot sometimes, especially at conferences.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And certainly at conferences, I will say, if you ever go to NTL or any of these conferences and out here local or nationwide, you'll probably see Maria there, either speaking on a panel or walking around. So flag her down and say hello. And then, of course, for CASEpeer, you can reach out to me too. Go ahead, Maria.
If anyone's going to the CEO Lawyer Conference next week in Atlanta, let me know, because we're hosting a dinner so that I can get you an invite.
Awesome. They can just email you?
Yeah.
Okay, fabulous. All right, you heard it here. So thank you everyone for joining us today. You can learn more also about LawRank by visiting lawrank.com and learn more about CASEpeer at casepeer.com. And we'll see you all next time. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Maria.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.